It was the smell of coffee that nearly killed me, but not in the way you might think. I was sitting at my usual table in the small café, staring at my laptop and sipping the same old dark brew that had gotten me through hundreds of long office days. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another day. But then, out of nowhere, a boyno, older than 14, shuffled over to my table, his eyes wide and desperate. He was wearing an old, tattered hoodie that looked too big for him, and his shoes were so worn down they might as well have been paper. He didn't ask for change, though. No, he didn't even open his mouth to beg. Instead, he simply held out his hand as if waiting for me to notice him. I wasn't a saint by any means, but I'd helped enough people over the years that I instinctively reached into my pocket and pulled out a $10 bill, handing it to him with a smile. It was just $10 after all. He took it. And then, before I could even blink, he slipped something into my hand. A crumpled, yellowed piece of paper. "No, don't drink it," he whispered, before turning and darting into the crowd of people outside the cafe. Barely had time to process what had just happened. My eyes fell to the paper and my heart stopped. In rushed, scrawled handwriting, the words read, "Don't drink that coffee. It's poisoned." I froze. My hand hovered over the cup, the dark liquid swirling in the ceramic mug, like some sort of poison, a silent warning that had just been laid bare before me. My coffee, the same coffee I had ordered every single morning for the past 2 years. Could it really be true? Was someone out there trying to kill me? The cafe, once so familiar, now felt suffocating. I glanced around, but the boy was already gone, lost in the sea of people passing by on the busy street. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he'd come to me, but something about that message felt far too urgent to ignore. I stared down at the coffee, my stomach tight with the first true feeling of fear I'd had in months. I should have left, should have walked out the door, thrown that coffee away and never looked back. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and pushed the cup away, my mind racing with the idea of what might be happening. My hands trembled, and it wasn't just from the shock. And that's when everything changed. For months earlier, I had been living the dream. At least, it had felt like a dream. I had a house that I loved, a wife, Kimberly, and 2 beautiful kids, Lily and Kevin. My life was simple but good. I went to work every day, came home, spent time with my family, and looked forward to the little things. The smell of dinner wafting through the house, the sound of my daughter's laughter, the warmth of my son's hugs. Everything was normal, or so I thought. It wasn't supposed to end the way it did. The call came one ordinary morning, just like any other. A truck had swerved on the highway, its tires skidding across the road as it crashed head-on into Kimberly's car. She and the kids didn't stand a chance. The crash was instantaneous. They were gone before they even had time to react. I remember the coldness of that moment. The way the voice on the other end of the phone was so clinical, so distant. I couldn't feel anything for what felt like hours. I don't know how I made it to the hospital, how I walked through the sterile halls, or how I ended up standing in front of 3 beds, each covered with a white sheet. It's the same 3 sheets that would be their final resting places. And that was it. My life as I knew it was over. I became a ghost of myself. I went through the motions work, errands, the occasional therapy session, but none of it mattered. The house was a tomb, and I was the only one left alive. My in-laws, Vivian and Leonard Blackwood, attended the funeral. Expected them to show some signs of grief. But no, their faces were cold, their eyes sharp with disdain, as if they were looking at an intruder. To them, I had always been the unworthy one, the lowly office worker who had stolen their precious daughter from them. Even at the funeral, Vivian couldn't help but remind me of that fact. "If you had been a better husband and father, maybe they wouldn't have died," she said, her voice as icy as the wind outside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself at her, ask her what the hell she knew about my pain. But all I could do was stand there, silent, watching them fade away after the ceremony, as if my loss meant nothing to them. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. Weeks turned into months. Kept going, kept breathing, kept existing, but everything felt hollow. Didn't know how to move forward. I didn't want to. It was too much to bear. So, I kept going to the same coffee shop, sat in the same seat by the window, and drank my coffee, day after day. It was the only thing that gave me any semblance of peace, until that morning. The boy, the warning. I can't explain why, but the feeling gnawed at me. The coffee, the message, the boy's eyes. I wasn't crazy. Something was wrong, and I was being watched. The feeling of being followed, hunted, had been creeping up on me for weeks. At first, it was just a sense, a little itch at the back of my mind that I pushed aside. But now, I could no longer ignore it. I wasn't alone in this. Someone was after me. The question wasn't who anymore, it was why. More importantly, how much longer until they finished what they started. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to entertain the thought that the people closest to me, the ones I had once trusted, might be the ones trying to kill me, but I had no choice. The signs were all pointing in one direction. That night, I sat in my living room, the silence of the house closing in on me like a vice. The photo frames around the room, once a source of comfort, only reminded me of what I had lost. Kimberly, Lily, Kevin. Their smiles stared back at me, taunting me, making me feel like I was still in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But it wasn't just the grief. There was something else. The constant pain in my stomach. The exhaustion that seemed to seep into my bones no matter how much I rested. The headaches that never went away. I went to the doctor. He said it was just stress. Grief, he said, could manifest in physical ways. It made sense, I told myself. The stress of losing my family, the trauma, the sadness. But deep down, I knew there was something else. When I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I thought I was just paranoid. But then the symptoms started getting worse. The stomach cramps turned into waves of nausea. The dizziness became so bad that I had to hold on to the walls just to keep from falling over. I was losing weight too. But that didn't explain the burning sensation I felt in my chest every time I breathed. I hadn't been to the coffee shop in a couple of days, but I decided to go back. Maybe I was overthinking it all. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe the boy was just another street kid looking for attention. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that something more sinister was at play. The cafe was still the same barista, same smell of roasted beans. But today something was off. Amanda the barista greeted me with a forced smile, but there was something different about her. The way her eyes shifted when she handed me my coffee. I had been coming to this cafe for months, yet today it felt like I was walking into an unfamiliar place. I tried to shake it off, but my instincts were screaming at me. As I sat down in my usual spot, I noticed something strange. A man was sitting at the counter, hunched over a notepad, scribbling something. Kept glancing at me, then looking away quickly, as if he didn't want to be noticed. I watched him for a few seconds, but when I looked away to check my phone, I noticed someone else across the street standing on the corner, hood up, phone in hand, staring directly at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind raced. Was it just paranoia? Was I overthinking everything? But the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me it wasn't. I wasn't imagining this. The boy's warning flashed in my mind again. Don't drink that coffee. It might be poisoned. I looked at the cup in my hand. The steam was rising, the aroma still as familiar as ever. But now, it felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like there was something dangerous in that cup. I couldn't drink it. I couldn't take the risk. I stood up, pretending everything was normal, and walked toward the door. Amanda looked at me, confused, as I left my coffee behind. I didn't care. The moment I stepped outside, I looked around the street, but the hooded figure was gone. The boy's warning echoed in my ears. This wasn't a coincidence. I needed answers. I needed to find the boy. I drove back home, my hands shaking on the wheel. The whole drive, I couldn't stop thinking about the boy. What did he know? Why did he warn me? And why did I feel so sure that the people closest to me were behind it all? I pulled into my driveway, and the first thing I did was check my phone. I wanted to call my father. He had always been the one to keep me grounded, but then I stopped. No, this was something I had to figure out on my own. I started with the most obvious, led the Blackwoods, Vivian and Leonard, my in-laws, Kimberly's parents. Ever since the funeral, I had been avoiding them. I couldn't bear to look at them, knowing how little they cared for me and my family. But now, with everything that was happening, couldn't ignore the possibility that they were somehow involved in this twisted game. I thought back to their behavior after the funeral. How Vivian had stood by my side, pretending to offer support, but her words had been venomous. "If you had been a better husband and father, maybe they wouldn't have died." Those words haunted me. They were cold, calculating. But now, something else stood out. Their sudden interest in the insurance money. Kimberly's life insurance. The $5 million that had come in after her death. That money was a goldmine, and I was the only thing standing in the way of them claiming it. Could they have been involved in my poisoning? Could they be behind the symptoms that were slowly draining the life out of me? I couldn't bear the thought, but it made too much sense. I needed to investigate. I called my father. He was a retired military agent, a tough, no-nonsense kind of guy. If anyone could help me, it was him. "Dad," I said when he picked up, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need you to help me look into something." "What's going on, son?" His voice was calm, but filled with concern. "I think someone's trying to kill me," I said bluntly. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could feel the weight of his silence. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice now more serious. "I think it's someone close to me. I need to find out who's behind this." "I'll help," he replied, without hesitation. "Tell me everything you've got." The next few days blurred into one long, agonizing spiral. Every morning I went back to the coffee shop, sitting by the same window, trying to look normal. Watched every person who walked by, every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion on their face, but nothing seemed out of place. That was the worst part, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people I had known for years. Every barista, every passerby, every strange face was a suspect in my mind. The boy's warning was still fresh in my head: "Don't drink that coffee. It's poisoned." And the longer I waited, the more the symptoms worsened. My stomach burned constantly, like a fire was consuming me from the inside out. The headaches were unbearable, and the fatigue, it felt like my body was slowly shutting down, piece by piece. One morning, as I stumbled into the coffee shop, trying to push through the pain, I caught a glimpse of Amanda, the barista. She was looking at me, but it wasn't the usual friendly smile she had always given me. No, there was something darker in her eyes, something cold. I sat at my usual seat, waiting for my coffee. But this time, I was watching. Every move she made, every glance she shot in my direction, it felt like I was on the edge of something huge, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. When she slid the cup toward me, I reached for it. But then, just as I was about to take a sip, a loud noise erupted from the door. I turned sharply, expecting to see a commotion, but instead, it was just a man walking in messy hair, dark glasses, a jacket that looked a little too expensive for someone who wasn't a regular. He glanced at me, then at Amanda. My gut clenched. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this way, but this time, the sensation was stronger. My instincts were screaming at me, this wasn't random. I put the coffee down, stood up, and walked out. I didn't know what it was, but something told me that I couldn't trust the shop anymore. Outside, the cold autumn air hit me like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching the people pass by, trying to clear my mind. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. The boy. Mark. He was standing by a trash can, picking through some discarded items, his eyes darting nervously. When he noticed me, his whole demeanor shifted. His shoulders tensed, and his eyes grew wide with fear. For a split second, I saw the same vulnerability in him as I had when he handed me the note. I rushed over to him. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm. "I need to talk to you. You warned me, right, about the coffee?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step back, his eyes darting nervously as if he was afraid someone was watching us. Then, in a barely audible whisper, he said, "I didn't know who you were at first. I saw you sitting there every day, and one day I overheard them talking." "A man he was talking about you, who?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Who was talking about me?" Mark glanced around before pulling me closer. "I don't know their names, but they said they were putting something in your coffee. They said it would make you weak, that you wouldn't notice. They described you, though. Said you were a man around 40, brown hair, always sitting by the window, drinking coffee. That's when I knew it was you." I stood there, stunned. Everything, the warnings, the strange symptoms, The odd behavior at the cafe was starting to come together. But there was more. I needed to know more. "I have to find them," I said, my voice low and desperate. "Where did you hear this? Do you know who they are?" He shook his head, his hand shaking. "I don't know. Swear I don't. But they were planning something bad. I couldn't just watch you drink that coffee and do nothing." I didn't know what to say. He was just a kid, barely a teenager, and yet he had risked his own safety to warn me. I felt a wave of guilt and gratitude wash over me. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know who you are, but I owe you my life." Mark's expression softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes that I couldn't shake. "I don't have much," he said quietly, "but I'll keep an eye out. If I hear anything else, I'll let you know." Before I could say anything more, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, my heart racing. This wasn't just a simple poisoning attempt. This was a calculated, well-planned attack. Whoever was behind this knew my routine, my habits, my weaknesses, and they were getting closer. I needed to act fast. I thought about my father. I hadn't told him everything yet, but it was time. That night, I sat down and texted him the details. Told him about Mark, about the cafe, about everything. Didn't hold back. I couldn't. Not anymore. The next morning, my father called me. "I've got someone who can help," he said, his voice steady. "We need to be careful. If they're as close as you think, they'll be watching you. I want to meet with you, and I'll bring someone who can do some digging." I felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. This wasn't over. I had barely hung up the phone when I received another message. It was from an unknown number. I opened it. The words were simple but chilling. "Stop looking. It's already too late." The message froze me in place. My thumb hovered over the phone screen as the words burned into my mind. "Stop looking. It's already too late." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My body went stiff as a sense of dread washed over me, suffocating every ounce of rational thought. This wasn't just a random message. Whoever sent it knew exactly what I was doing. They knew I was getting closer to the truth. The fear that had been lingering in my chest for weeks now roared to life, pounding against my ribs. I tossed my phone onto the coffee table, hands shaking. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I grabbed my coat and left the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and I couldn't sit still for another moment. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to know if I was already too late. Was I already poisoned? Was someone else in my life being targeted too? I drove to my father's house. I didn't tell him about the message. I couldn't. I wasn't sure who I could trust with it. But I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get a lot worse. When I pulled into his driveway, he was already waiting outside. His sharp eyes scanned the area, his stance rigid. The quiet strength I'd always admired in him was now tainted with a shadow of worry. "Timothy," he said, his voice a little more strained than usual. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked straight past him, entering the house without a word. "I got the message," I finally said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Someone knows I'm looking into this. They told me to stop, said it's too late." My father's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. "That's a threat. Whoever's behind this isn't playing around. We need to get serious now, and I need you to be smart about this." "Smart," laughed bitterly. "I'm already playing catch-up. These people know everything about me." "They're close, Dad. They're too close." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out, but you have to trust me. You need to be patient. Don't confront anyone yet. And no matter what, don't drink anything else from that coffee shop." I nodded, but deep down I knew the clock was ticking. Time was running out. I spent the next few days in a haze, consumed by the thoughts of the message, the boy, the poison. I couldn't let go of the nagging feeling that I was being cornered, that I was running out of time. Mark, the boy who had warned me, was always on my mind. I kept asking myself the same questions. Who was he really? How did he know? And why had he chosen to speak up? Was he being forced to help me, or did he have his own reasons? I couldn't shake the thought of him living in the shadows, constantly moving, a pawn in a game much bigger than him. And yet, I owed him my life. Not for him. I might have already sipped that poisoned coffee without a second thought. As the days wore on, I started to notice more strange things. My symptoms hadn't improved. In fact, they were getting worse. I found it difficult to get out of bed in the mornings, my body weighed down by an exhaustion I couldn't explain. The headaches had become constant, a searing throb behind my eyes that never seemed to fade. My stomach still burned, and the nausea had become unbearable. It was like I was slowly disintegrating from the inside out. I tried to ignore it. I had to. The truth was too horrifying to face. But I couldn't keep pretending that it was just grief or stress. One evening, I received another call. This time it wasn't my father. It was Vivian, Kimberly's mother. Her voice was sweet, like honey, but I could feel the venom in it. "Timothy, darling, I've been so worried about you. You've been through so much lately, and I know it's been hard on you. But have you thought about what you're going to do with the insurance money?" The question sent a cold shiver down my spine. I had been dreading this moment. The last thing I wanted to do was talk about the money. It felt like a betrayal to Kimberly, to Lily and Kevin. But I knew that Vivian wasn't asking out of concern for me. She was asking because that money meant everything to her. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "I haven't thought about it yet. I just want to focus on getting better." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a light, almost condescending laugh. "Of course, dear. But you must understand we're family, and family looks out for each other, don't they? You could put that money to good use. Invest it. Help the family business. You wouldn't want it to go to waste." I nearly choked on my own words. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. I think I need to take my time with this." Of course, she said, but her voice had shifted. There was something cold underneath her sweetness now. "But remember, Timothy, the Blackwood name has always been about trust. I hope you'll trust us in the future, especially when it comes to things that really matter." The phone clicked off, and I was left holding the receiver in my hand, feeling a chill run through me. Vivian's words hung in the air like a threat, and I knew it was just the beginning. They were coming for the money, for me, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. I felt the weight of her words as I stood there, staring at the phone, and then it hit me. I wasn't just a target because of the insurance money. I was a target because I was the only obstacle between them and what they craved. The Blackwoods had already made their move, had been poisoning me for weeks, and now they were going to make their final push. But I wasn't going to let them win. I couldn't. Not after everything I had lost. I needed to confront them. I needed to find out what they were really capable of, and how far they would go to get their hands on that money. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying without knowing the truth. But I knew this. If I was going to survive, I had to be smarter than they were. I had to act fast. I turned to my phone, dialing my father's number. "Dad, it's time," I said when he answered. "It's time to take them down." The next few days felt like I was living in the eye of a storm, quiet before the chaos, where everything was in place, but I knew something violent was about to hit. I met my father that afternoon, a plan already forming in my mind. I could see the concern in his eyes, the weight of the situation settling on his broad shoulders. He wasn't the kind of man to be afraid of confrontation, but he had always warned me to avoid unnecessary danger. "Timothy, you sure about this?" he asked, his voice steady, but with an edge of caution. "Once we go after them, there's no going back. They'll know you're onto them, and I'm not sure we're ready for that." I looked my father dead in the eye, my resolve firm. "I don't have a choice. They've already made their move. I know it's them. I can feel it." I wasn't just talking about Vivian and Leonard anymore. This had grown into something bigger than just my in-laws. They were merely the puppets. There was someone pulling their strings, someone more dangerous, more powerful, someone who had been using them for their own gain. The message I'd received a few days ago, the one telling me to stop looking, had only confirmed it. Whoever was behind this knew that I was digging too deep. They were trying to scare me into stopping, but I wouldn't back down. Not now. "We need to set a trap," I said, my voice hard. "We need to catch them in the act, and we need leverage. Something that'll make them think twice before going any further." My father nodded, his eyes narrowing with thought. "I've got an old contact who can help us with that. We'll need to be quick, and we'll need to act like we're not watching them. If they know we're onto them, they'll cover their tracks." I agreed. We couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Blackwoods were too powerful, too ruthless. We needed evidence, real, irrefutable evidence that would expose them for who they truly were. The first step was to gather everything I had: photos, the messages, the confession from Jake, the barista. We needed to make sure that when we moved, we had everything in place. My father's contact, a former investigator with the FBI, was already working on the case. He had connections. People who could get into places I couldn't. But still, it was dangerous. I knew the stakes. If we were caught, it would be the end for me. It didn't take long for my father's contact to send back the first bit of information, a set of photos taken from a distance, Vivian and Leonard. Meeting with someone in a dark alley behind their family's estate. The man they were meeting with had a face I didn't recognize, but there was something cold, calculating about him. He was part of the organization. I knew it. That night I couldn't sleep. My body was racked with pain, my mind racing with thoughts of the Blackwoods and their plan. I kept thinking about the boy Mark. How had he gotten involved in all of this? Why had he risked his safety to warn me? I owed him more than just gratitude. I decided to find him. I knew the streets he frequented. It's the alleyways near the coffee shop, the places where he had to hide from the world. When I arrived, I found him sitting in the same spot, his head down, his body curled in on itself. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes dirty, his face gaunt. But when he saw me, his eyes brightened, though there was still a wariness in them. I walked over slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Mark," I said gently, "I need your help. I've found them. I found the people who've been poisoning me. But I need more. I need to know who else is involved." He didn't respond right away. His eyes flickered to the ground, then back to me. I don't know what to say. I'm just trying to stay out of it all. It's dangerous. People like that. They don't care about anyone. I crouched down to his level, trying to make him understand. "You've saved my life. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. You're the only person who knows anything about them. Please, I need your help." His shoulders sagged as if the weight of the world was on him. I overheard them. "The man they were meeting with, the one I told you about, he's part of the organization. They call it the network. They're ruthless. They take people's lives for money. They've done it before." My stomach churned as I processed his words. This wasn't just about my in-laws. This was something bigger, an entire network of criminals, assassins, people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. "I can't go against them," Mark said, his voice trembling. "They'll kill me. They'll kill anyone who tries to stop them." "I'm not asking you to go against them," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I'm asking you to help me stop them. You don't have to face them head on. Just tell me everything you know. Help me gather more information. I'll protect you." He hesitated, looking at me with uncertainty. But then something in his eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. "All right," he whispered. "I'll help you. But we have to be careful. They'll be watching." We spent the next few hours talking. Mark told me everything he knew about the organization, about the meetings, the people involved, the network that spanned across the country. He had overheard conversations, seen faces, and pieced together small fragments of information that had slowly built a picture of something far darker than I had ever imagined. I knew then that I was in over my head. But I also knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone anymore. Mark was with me. And together, we were going to take them down. The following days were a blur of planning, information gathering, and waiting. My father's contact had secured surveillance on Vivian and Leonard, watching their every move. We were getting closer, but I could feel the tension building. They were aware now. They were watching me, watching us. That's when it happened. I came home one night to find my house completely ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. My heart dropped into my stomach. I knew they had found me. But what they hadn't counted on was me. I wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not after everything I had lost. I stood in the doorway, frozen in place. My house had been torn apart. Every drawer had been pulled open, papers scattered across the floor, books and family photos knocked over, their contents strewn everywhere. It looked like a whirlwind had passed through. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment I thought I might collapse. They knew I was getting too close. But there was something even worse. The smell. Something was off, something acrid, hanging in the air. I stepped further into the living room, my breath shallow, my mind racing. The smell, it was faint, but unmistakable. But I wasn't going to let it break me, not this time. I stumbled back toward the front door, my body already betraying me, a wave of dizziness threatening to knock me out. I had to act fast. My first instinct was to call my father, but I knew the time for that had passed. They were too close now. They wouldn't give me a second chance. Instead, I pulled out my phone, texting Mark. "They've been here. It's happening." Within seconds, he replied, "I'm coming. Don't go anywhere." I didn't have much time. I grabbed the hidden camera equipment my father had left for me and set it up in the living room, positioning it so that it could capture every angle of the room. I knew that whatever was going to happen next, it had to be documented. This was my chance to finally bring them down. I barely had time to finish when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was them, Vivian, Leonard. I quickly grabbed the insurance documents, the ones that had been hidden in the safe in the back room. They were everything. They were the leverage I needed. I could hear their voices now, muffled outside the front door. They were arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they were coming. They thought I was still weak, still on the verge of death. They didn't know that I was ready. When the door opened, I didn't flinch. Vivian stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room as if she owned the place. Leonard stood behind her, his face expressionless, his hands shoved in his pockets. "You look worse than I imagined." I didn't say anything. Instead, I stepped forward, my body heavy with exhaustion, but my resolve stronger than ever. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the hidden recorder, pressing the button with a shaking finger. "You shouldn't have come," I said, my voice cold. "I know everything." Vivian's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly masked it with a false grin. "I'm just here to check on you, dear. Leonard and I were so concerned. You've been through so much." I wanted to scream at her, tell her I knew everything about their plan. But I kept my cool, waiting for the right moment. Leonard, standing stiff behind Vivian, finally spoke. "You've been acting strange, Timothy. I think it's time we had a real talk about that money. We're going to have to make some decisions, and soon." His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but I could feel the weight of his words. The threat in them was clear. "I've made my decision," I said, pulling out the insurance documents and holding them up between us. "You're not getting a penny." Vivian's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't know what you're dealing with. We've been patient, but we're done waiting. You're going to sign those documents, Timothy, whether you're dead or alive." At that moment, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew she had pushed too far, but she didn't know that I had the upper hand now. The cameras were recording. Evidence was in my hands. "What did you think would happen?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the pounding in my head. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I wouldn't fight back?" Vivian took a step forward, but Leonard grabbed her arm, stopping her. "Let him talk. We'll see how long he lasts," he sneered. But I could see the doubt in their eyes now. They were trying to hide it, trying to keep their composure, but they were nervous, and that gave me the edge I needed. "You think I'm just going to roll over and let you take what's mine?" I continued. "I know about the organization. I know about the poisoning. I know you've been using me as your pawn to get to the money. Well, I'm not your pawn anymore." Vivian's face twisted with rage. "You're nothing but a fool, Timothy. You've been a fool from the start. You think you can win? You think you can take down the Blackwood name? You'll always be nothing." The venom in her words stung, but I wasn't about to back down. I could feel my strength waning, but I had to keep going. I had to push through. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper but filled with power. "And when you leave, know this. I'll make sure the whole world knows what you did. You'll never get the money. You'll never hurt anyone again." Leonard stepped forward, his eyes cold and calculating. "You're making a mistake, Timothy. A big one." He moved as if to grab the documents, but I stepped back quickly, my hand reaching into my pocket for the small vial I had secretly collected from the coffee shop. It was my trump card, Thallium enough to prove everything. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" I asked, pulling the vial from my pocket. "I've got everything on you. Your little game is over." Vivian's eyes widened as she saw the vial. "What is that?" she hissed. "It's proof. Proof of your plan to kill me. When the authorities get hold of this, it's game over for you." I saw the panic in their eyes. The power had shifted. My heart skipped a beat, and I didn't have to look to know it was the police. My father had come through. Before either of them could react, the door burst open and officers flooded in, grabbing Vivian and Leonard. They tried to resist, but it was too late. The evidence was in the open, and they were caught. "Under arrest," one of the officers said, his voice cold as they cuffed them both. As they were let out, I stood there, a sense of disbelief washing over me. It was finally over. The nightmare that had been haunting me for months was coming to an end. My father walked in behind the officers, his face grim, but filled with pride. "You did good, Timothy. You didn't just survive. You fought back." I nodded, my body sagging with exhaustion. "I couldn't have done it without you, without Mark." Mark, the boy who had risked everything to warn me. The boy who had saved my life. I found him later that night, sitting outside the coffee shop, looking just as lost and hopeless as before. "I made it," I said, kneeling down beside him. "We did it." Mark's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. "Who?" He smiled, a small, cautious smile, as if he couldn't believe it. "You really did it. I thought you were going to die, man. But you didn't. You're still here?" "I'm still here," I said, offering him my hand. "And I'm not giving up. Not now, not ever." As we stood together, looking at the remnants of the life I once had, I realized something. The scars would always remain. The loss of Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin would never leave me. But the fight for truth, for justice, that was my purpose now. And as I walked into the night with Mark by my side, I knew that no matter how dark things had been, I could still carry the light of hope forward.